Yeah. All right. Welcome to Life Extension Live. I'm Dr. Mike, your host, and I am here with Dr. Crystal Gossert, my co-host. Welcome to the show, as always, Dr. Crystal.
Hello.
Today we're talking.
Pumped.
Yeah, we're talking. This is a good topic. We're talking about constipation. You know why this is important? It's one of the most common complaints that people go into their general doctor with, their family physician, internal medicine, what have you. So constipation is a big issue. So here's what we're going to do today. So you got to stick around to get all the answers you want. Number one, what causes constipation?
Yes.
Number two, how to relieve constipation. Now that's important. A lot of you're taking lots of laxatives. We don't like that. We have better solutions for you. Number three, what you can eat when constipated. And then at the end of the day, we're going to look a little bit more at some of the key nutrients that we believe are, awesome for this. It can provide relief. So Dr. Crystal, you ready to talk about constipation?
That's right. Now, before we talk about what's going wrong, should we just tell them how often should you go?
Yes, we should. And give them that. There's a range. You told me a weekly range. It was like a very low number to a higher number per week of bowel movements. Give the listeners that range again, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, so it can range normal from 3 times a day to 3 times a week. So that means, that's a big range from 3 to 21 poops a week. And
I listen, doctor, everybody's different. Everybody has their normal pattern, what's right for somebody, not right for somebody else. But I'm just going to say it. I think everybody needs to have a good bowel movement every day. And I think it should be in the morning because of circadian rhythms. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, that is the time where you have more of those contractions in the digestive tract that's really helping to push the food along that's strongest in the morning. So, yeah, I mean, you should wake up, have a drink of water, have about a cup of water, and then you should get that good feeling.
Yeah. For me, it's my espresso shot. Let me tell you, it gets things moving. It really does.
That's very true, Dr. Mike. But just be careful because caffeine gets a lot of people moving. It helps me go, but too much caffeine can get you dehydrated, and then you'll have, the opposite.
I get up, I have my little shot, and I have my nice little movement, and I'm happy. So I do think that whole idea of 3 times per week being normal, I'm not so sure about that. But let's so constipation, it's a big issue for a lot of people. When you think about it, what's causing this to happen? Because if you look at age groups real quick, yeah. Dr. Crystal, if you look at kids, yes, kids can get constipated, but it's pretty rare. It's not chronic. It's usually just occasional, right? Yeah. You get teenage years, very rare. 20s, 30s, very rare. Then all of a sudden you get in your 40s and 50s and people can't poop.
Yes.
What's going on there?
Especially women, Dr. Mike. All you women out there, if you're having trouble going, it's usually due to the hormonal changes, the hormonal imbalances that occur during perimenopause and menopause. And then sometimes it could be due, and I have to say this cautiously, but maybe that's the time where you start taking calcium, and too much calcium without enough magnesium balancing out that calcium can also may lead to some of your constipation.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about medications overall, though? A lot of people, what is it? The average person over 50 is on 2 to 3 meds per day. It's like a high number. Is there something going on there, maybe?
Well, yes, it could be your antacid that you're taking. So we do see some of the over-counter antacids. Maybe you're having digestive issues in one area. You take your antacids, and now it's causing digestive issues in other areas of the digestive tract. It could be antidepressant medication, some high blood pressure medications as well, diuretics. So those of you who are on diuretics for
I
blood
see.
pressure, maybe that could also be causing it, especially if you're not drinking enough water.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, though, it's sometimes we don't always know the exact cause, right? I mean, it's one of those
Yeah.
things in life. There's a formal word for that in medicine. It's called idiopathic. It's like we don't get it all the time. We don't understand it all the time, but yet so many people come in and complain about constipation. So we wanted to talk about that today. Now we're going to get into like what you can eat when you're constipated and all that kind of stuff. But before we do that, a lot of people, Dr. Crystal, are taking laxatives. As a matter of fact, you could go into a convenience store, grocery store, go into their little like health section, right?
Yes.
Most of them have that now, right? And there usually is a whole row, a whole aisle for laxatives.
I'm laughing, Dr. Mike. Even as a kid, there were times where I couldn't go, and my mom would give me a suppository, like, and she would bend over. She would just get me right. And let me tell you, it works, but there are all kinds of laxatives and they work in many different ways.
Yeah. You got ones that are more stimulants. There's ones that bring water into the system. Those are usually called osmotic,
Yes.
stool softeners. Listen, and by the way, the efficacy of laxatives, it's very independent based on the person. It's 50-50. Some people love them, works for a lot of people. Some people really get very little relief. And what I see happening is the people that get little relief from the laxatives, what do? They do more and more and more and more.
Yes.
And I think there's a problem there. What do you think?
I 100% agree, especially the stimulant laxatives. Those are the ones that's kind of working with the nervous system, stimulating what we call peristalsis, or the movement of the stool through the colon. And that's just really, it can actually in the long run be more problematic. So those laxatives, the stimulant ones, are not meant for long-term use, especially, some people, that's the only way they can go.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy.
Let's back up for 1 sec before we get into foods and other nutrients and stuff that I think are better. So there's occasional constipation, right? And then there's what we call chronic. Let's define as best we can what that means, occasional versus chronic. How do we break that down?
Right. Well, when you think about constipation in general, it's not just not being able to go. It is when you go, you're straining, you feel like you have to sit there all day, which that's a whole nother thing, because you should never just sit and push.
Yeah, because now you're going to get hemorrhoids, and that's a whole nother issue.
Exactly. And then you have the constipation where you're going, but the stools aren't really formed properly. They're kind of those little pebbles that can sometimes come out as well. So it really all depends on, you have that piece. And then of course, occasionally you may have some issues, but if you find that you are always having to strain, you can never go without there being some type of extra added motivation from something that you're taking, or even just mentally having to sit there, then that's what we're dealing with when we talk about the chronic constipation. And there are people who are on both ends of the spectrum. Chronic could be due to an underlying health issues. Maybe it's a thyroid issue, or maybe, that something else like that's going on.
Yeah. So if you fall into that chronic category, you got to be seen by your doctor, right? Your doctor needs to check this out. Your doctor needs to rule out other hormones that might be causing it.
Yes.
Are we going to, maybe we'll get into this a little bit more. I mean, one of the most common complaints of postmenopausal women, right, is constipation. And we know that there's a lot of estrogen and progesterone imbalances there. And so getting your hormones tested, having your doctor look at that stuff, that could be a great place to start for some of the, at least chronic constipation. Now the occasional, I think for most people, that's probably probably related to food issues. You're stepped away from your normal diet for a while, right?
Yes, you see that when people travel. People often say, "Oh my goodness, I get on a plane, the moment I go on vacation, I can't go." And some people think that there's something with the altitude. What I think is you probably just aren't eating how you would normally eat. You're off your schedule, but that could be one of the issues as well.
Yeah. And so occasional constipation, if that's something you deal with, the stimulants are probably a little bit safer there. Although I do think we have better options, and we're going to talk about those better options. So stick with us. But what I worry about is people dealing with the chronic constipation and doing stimulant after stimulant after stimulant, plus who knows, a whole host of other strategies just to have a bowel movement. So I really think it's important. Go talk to your doctor, get your hormones checked. That's a great place to start. Look at your diet. There's a lot. Here's why constipation is so difficult. It could have multiple causes, right? It's not just, here's why you're constipated. We fix that and you're fine. That rarely happens.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of different reasons why you could be constipated. Now, let's talk about occasional constipation first. If somebody's dealing with, all right, I'm constipated, I went on that trip, I changed my diet, what have you, do you have foods that somebody like that should be eating more? Or does it matter if it's occasional or chronic? Are there foods that we could be eating that could help to have a better bowel movement?
Yes, there are. And before we do that, and we actually have a slide, I do want to just comment because we have a few people watching. Gabriella, Linda,
Hi, Linda.
Constantina. Thank you so much. I want our listeners also to add into the chat what are some foods that they eat that whenever they're feeling a little constipated and they're wanting some help going. But yes, regardless as to whether or not it's chronic or occasional constipation, your diet is everything.
Yeah.
Start with water. And then we do have a image, Robson, if you can put that up, to go over some of the foods that you would want to eat and foods that you may want to avoid.
Now, when we say avoid, right? Because Dr. Crystal, I look at that list to avoid. I like a lot of that stuff. You're asking a lot from me to avoid, especially the dairy. What's one of my favorite foods, Dr. Crystal?
Cheese.
Yeah. So maybe if you're occasionally constipated, to avoid those foods completely for a few days, that might not be a bad idea, right?
Right. And I would have to comment. You're right, Dr. Mike. It's probably foods to limit. It's foods that we sometimes find ourselves eating all the time. We have eggs with cheese for breakfast. Then we have a sandwich with more cheese for lunch. And then we have dinner with some other type of cheese.
Yes, you got me. That's what I do.
Right. So we overdo it. And you have to realize those foods, one, they have protein, which it's a little bit harder on the digestive tract to digest. So it moves through a little bit slower. But two, they don't have fiber. There's no fiber in those foods.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Mary, prunes and smooth move tea.
That's great. Who said that? Mary? Hi, Mary.
That was Mary.
That's
my
great.
dad, that he would drink smooth move. That was the thing in our house. An enema and smooth move tea.
And add the enema in there, by the way. But so occasional constipation, I think we both agree. Yeah, maybe avoid the meat, the dairy for a little bit, right? The eggs.
Yes.
If what that means to you, 3, 4, 5 days, whatever, and then you can reintroduce them. Chronic constipation, maybe it's more just about limiting as much as you can those food sources. Now, Robson, he's our producer in the background. Hey, Robson, can you put the slide back up? Because let's talk about the foods to eat.
Yes.
And there you go. And by the way, I don't know, prunes have such a bad rap. I love prunes.
Me too. They're so good. And you know, my kids love them, which makes me a happy mom.
Yeah. It's like the prunes. The prunes are like the people see it as the old people food or something. Well, then I'm old, I guess. I love eating them.
Now I'll tell you, the prune juice is a little rough, but the actual prune, they are great. And a lot of people think that it's the fiber, but it's actually the sugar alcohols, like the sorbitol that's in the prunes that helps you go.
Now, what about below that? You have high fiber fruit. Can you give us some examples of high fiber fruit versus, I guess, low fiber fruit then?
Yes. So for example, an apple. You will have about 5 grams of fiber in an apple or a pear. There are some fruit where you have to eat large amounts of those of the fruit in order to get some of that fiber. So you won't see quite as much fiber in all of the fruits that you eat. But yes, apples are great, pears are great. We are going to, it's not on this list, but bananas, that's kind of
that would have been surprising to me.
It's in between. There is some research that bananas contain a type of starch that's not as easily broken down. So someone who's dealing with maybe chronic constipation, maybe you should limit the bananas. It should be fine for occasional, but you know, it's one of those foods that
when you looked at the fruits that are high in fiber, like the apple there, it's important to eat the skin, right? Because that's where you're getting most of that fiber. Because I know a lot of people like to peel the fruit. They want to get right down to the sugary pulp. That's what we like in this time. We want to eat that sugar. So keep the skin on for these as well, right?
Yes. And then one comment about the olive and flaxseed oil. Back in the day, and maybe still today, you'll find mineral oil. You know, some of the old school parents are still giving their children a spoonful of mineral oil when they need to, you know, help to stimulate a bowel movement. And so it's not necessarily the mineral oil. You can substitute it for a spoonful of olive oil or flaxseed oil. It's just that oil helps to kind of lubricate the stool and helps it slide through.
Makes sense, right? Yeah, it does. And it's good for you. There's good fats in those types of oils. Yeah. All right. So those are some foods, you know, maybe to avoid for a while, limit if it's chronic constipation for you, and then definitely kick up high fiber fruits, the flaxseed, all the omega oils, all that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to medication or it comes to supplementation, again, laxatives can be fine, but realize there's many different laxatives. The big group are the stimulants. Probably don't want to do those too often. Maybe with occasional once in a while. But stew softeners are probably a better bet.
Yes.
The bulking agents probably a better bet. So laxatives, when you go to your store, right, Dr. Christo, and you see that whole aisle of laxatives, you got to realize there could be many different kinds.
Yes.
So maybe focus on the ones that aren't so stimulating to the gut.
Yes. And you may just have to have a conversation with the pharmacist if you're unsure exactly how this is working, in order to make sure you stay away from the stimulant laxatives. You do also find those in some of the like those weight loss teas or those detoxes, supplements or teas that can make you go to the bathroom. Usually those are stimulants. Stimulant laxatives are included in those.
So let's talk then about supplements that have some good clinical research behind them, good efficacy to work. We have magnesium, vitamin C, and of course, we got to talk about the probiotics that can be very, very effective here in helping people with constipation. Now, I think we're going to spend more of our time on the probiotics, right? But real quick, you know, magnesium, listen, it works well. You know, I've done this before, you know, where occasional constipation. I am one of those traveler type people.
Oh,
if I get off, I think we've talked about this before. If I get off my core diet, it affects me. It does. I get a little stuffed up. Yeah. But I love all I do, and it's nothing fancy. It's just basic magnesium. You can do magnesium citrate, oxide, whatever. Doesn't really matter. I do a lot. It's about 1,000 milligrams of magnesium before I go to bed.
Oh, Dr. Mike, that's what I do.
That helps out a lot, right?
Not 1,000. 500 for me is all it takes.
Well, you got to find what you need, right?
Right.
You know? Yeah. For me, it was 1,500 for you. You can go higher in that if you need be. You just got to find that right place for you. So magnesium is great. Adding vitamin C to that's pretty helpful too, right?
Yes, both of those can really help to kind of draw some water into the large intestines to help that stool to pass along. So yes, the magnesium, the vitamin C, and we always suggest to start with a lower dose and then work your way up, and then you will find what we call the bowel tolerance. And it's very individual, the exact dose that may work for one person versus another person.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, when I have to do that, one dose for me, that 1 gram of magnesium, I don't need my espresso shot to get moving, Dr. Chris. I get up in the morning, I'm pretty much ready to go.
All right.
It's pretty quick, right? Yeah, so it's really awesome. But hey, a lot of good research on probiotics now. Probiotics, they're all over the news, all over the media, and people watching, they should be. We're learning so much about healthy bacteria, healthy microbes. And we're getting really detailed with it, aren't we? Very specific types.
Very specific.
Very specific, doing some pretty awesome things. So tell us about what we've learned recently about probiotics and constipation.
I'm happy you mentioned very specific type because many people think, oh, I take a probiotic, I should be good to go. That's going to help. Maybe I'll increase the amount that I'm taking. And probiotics just don't work that way. In research, researchers have identified a specific strain of probiotic, and that helps to increase colonic transit time.
Okay, we got to explain that.
Yes. And so that's basically the time that it takes for your stool to kind of move through the colon. And for an average individual, a healthy individual, it's around 24 hours. It can go up to 40 hours, 30 to 40 hours. But really, the faster that the speed of that colonic transit, then the better off you'll have. Then you don't have that waste just sitting in the intestine.
So let me ask. So people that are experiencing, whether it's occasional or chronic, their transit time, the amount of time it takes to move through is going to be a lot longer,
right,
than somebody who's not having issues, who's pretty regular at that moment in time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So anytime we then study something and we see an increase in transit time, that's a pretty good thing to do.
That's a good thing to do. So there's a specific strain of probiotic, and I have it written down to make sure I get it right. Bifidobacterium lactis, and this is what makes it unique. HN019.
That's the strain. That is the strain. Yeah, just real quick, Dr. Crystal, we talked about this. Let's use the analogy of dogs again, right?
Oh, yes.
There's many different types of dogs, right? So, here you have this Bifidobacterium lactis. That's kind of like a dog, but it's the HN019 that makes it a specific type of breed, like a Chihuahua or whatever, that helps to move things through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with that strain, they found that in clinical research, colonic or colon transit time was about 57% faster compared to the original time. And so you do see some of the study details on the screen, a randomized triple-blind placebo-controlled trial. I'm telling you, you can't get any better than that. And so they tested out a couple of different doses of this particular strain added to yogurt or placebo. And if you go to the next slide, Robson, you'll see some of the results. So you'll see the people who receive the placebo, we typically think of that as a sugar pill, Dr. Mike. There was
Right.
no change in that transit time.
Right. You can
The
see that there. And there you got the low dose and the high dose. Before you continue with this, I think there's something really important on that previous slide.
Yeah.
Roxanne, can you go back to that? Let's talk about CFUs for a sec, right? Because a lot of people think when it comes to probiotics, the higher the CFU, the better, right, Dr. Crystal? And you have some products that are formulated out there with CFUs that are like, I mean, I can't, like, 150 billion CFUs and what.
Right.
You've seen some of that. But when it comes down to specific strains doing specific things, you don't always need those. Higher is not always better. It's really about what the research showed. And the research showed that even in the low dose group, which was what was that? Go back to that previous slide, Robson.
1.8 billion.
Yeah, and the other one, 17. I mean, if somebody just looked at those CFUs, they'd be like, those are low.
Yes,
but
and that
no, they brought the clinical result, right?
Yeah, so when you talk about an improvement in colonic transit time, even with that low dose, they went from about 59.5 hours, which is an abnormally long transit time. That person's constipated. They went improved to about 41 hours. So even that low dose brought them almost to what we would consider the healthy time that the stool sits in.
Yeah, let's see that second slide, Robson. Yeah, there it is. So 31% faster transit time with the low dose. High dose, obviously better, right? So 57% better. So we're probably thinking for this specific strain, right? This specific breed, if you will, that the higher dose is probably better to get your bowels moving, right?
And yes, for someone who's dealing with occasional constipation, then you can see that this is helpful. Those individuals went from about 49 hours to roughly 21 hours, that transit time. So that's a pretty big improvement. But we can't stop here, Dr. Mike, because because you're going faster doesn't always mean that you're feeling better.
Oh, good point.
Yes. And so in that study, the participants were also provided a questionnaire. And of course, they had a 42% decrease in constipation frequency, but their abdominal pain improved and the nausea feeling improved. And you don't get this often with fiber or some other solution. So we're really excited to see this research with the strain of bacteria.
Yeah. So they had more bowel movements and overall they felt better at the end of the day, right? That's
right.
That's like a win. That's like a win-win-win based on those results, right? And this is with a probiotic. This is with a specific strain of bacteria that's good for you, right? So well tolerated, very little side effect, if any at all, right?
Right.
This is a great study. So hopefully, if you're somebody out there and you're dealing a lot with, occasional, but definitely chronic constipation, talk to your doctor, get some hormones checked. I think that's still very important, right?
Right.
But talk to them about this specific strain of probiotic that's improving not only transit time, but improving symptoms as well. And then don't forget magnesium, vitamin C, great ones to add as well. And if it's occasional, nothing wrong with the laxatives, but on a rare occasion. That's how those drugs are supposed to be used, right, Dr. Gerson? On a rare occasion, not these daily uses. So this was some great information. We're hoping you learned something from this. If you have more questions, hey, write it in the comments. We got a great social media team. They can answer a lot of those for you. So keep asking your questions. We really appreciate you guys hanging around with us for the past 30 minutes talking about constipation.
Yep. Oh, and we have a protocol as well.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Tell us about that. I forgot.
This week.
It's lifeextension.com/constipation.
Easy to remember.
Very easy. Lifeextension.com/constipation. If you want to learn like the details of not going to the bathroom, not having a read that protocol. Listen, Life Extension doesn't mess around, right, Dr. Crystal?
Yes, and there are more details on the different foods, also kind of some of the differences in the types of medications, like questions that you need to ask your doctor. So the protocol is the place to go as a resource.
That's awesome. Dr. Crystal, great job.
Yes, Dr. Mike.
Thanks for joining me. Hey, thank you for everyone watching today. Don't forget, we go live every single Wednesday. Sometimes it's both of us. Sometimes it's Dr. Crystal making a trail mix or something. Usually if it's food, it's Dr. Crystal by herself. Have you noticed that, right? It's like, that's kind of the trend, right?
Yeah.
But we're excited that you're joining the Life Extension Live family. Also, hey, check out, Dr. Crystal and I have a podcast.
Oh, yes.
Check that out as well. That's liveforeverish.com. We got a bunch of episodes that you can learn about stuff there as well. So thanks for joining us. Dr. Crystal, thank you. Everybody, have a great day.